Stephen is laying out copies of the burn plan if you want to snag one on your way out, just to kind of look at it. It's different than the template John talked about. It's just one that we wrote in paragraph form. There's many different ways to do it. So I'm going to talk about weather, and John kind of covered quite a bit on the wind, which was really good. But the two things that we're looking at the most when it comes to weather on burning is wind and relative humidities. And those are usually the things that are going to drive that fire, the intensity of the fire. And so with wind, John said we want a consistent wind. You know, that is absolutely key. We want to know when we light a fire, we know which direction it's going, so we can plan the backfires and the flank fires that Stephen will talk about here in a little bit. So we want a consistent wind. We want it up to about 15 miles an hour. That's including gusts. So if you look at some of the weather forecasting, National Weather Service and Mesonet, they'll give you sometimes the sustained winds, but the gusts on National Weather Service, they'll give you those so you know you're out of prescription. Sometimes they might say sustained wind 13 miles an hour. So we're good, but the gust might be gusting to 18 to 20 miles an hour. So then you're out of prescription and it's dangerous. So wind helps from several different aspects. Number one, you know where that fire is going, so you know it's containable. Number two, it helps with what's called preheating. So when we have fuels out here, that fire, it pushes that fire into the fuel in front, and it preheats that fuel, dries it out, and it helps it carry through the fuel. So you want that fire, the wind pushing and preheating the fuels in front of you, especially when we're burning in summertime. So when we're burning in summertime, we have a lot of green vegetation. We usually have higher humidities. So you want a little more wind to preheat and boil out the water that's in that green vegetation. So summertime is usually winds is a little more important, but it's often hard to come by in the summertime just because our weather patterns in this part of the world. So that's wind. Humidities is another thing, and that just, you know, what we're burning, this dead grass, when we're burning leaves in the timber, that's what we call 1 hour fuels. That means that the moisture in those fuels lag humidity by 1 hour. So we look out here right now and this is all pretty wet and pretty damp, but this afternoon these fuels are going to be really good as this humidity starts dropping today. They're going to be good to burn. So they, you know, some people who were riding me today, we went past that black spot up there. It was 22% humidity that day when we burned. That's a pretty low humidity, but we had more trouble getting stuck than we did the fire. So even though everything's wet, you can burn really, really well if those humidities drop, is what I'm getting at. So kind of we like to burn no less than 30% humidity. The weatherman that day was wrong. The weatherman said it was going to bottom out about 31% humidity, and we were on site with a Kestrel testing. It was about 22% humidity when we finished. So we know the weatherman is wrong, right? They're wrong, and so we always got to keep that in mind. But the humidities is what the volatility of those fuels. So we have a lower humidity. It means it's going to burn a lot better, a lot easier. And all these things, as you burn, you kind of become experienced. You start to read the fuels, the winds, the humidities. You can kind of start putting these all together in a piece. So, you know, like that right behind us, a lot of that Johnson grass, dead Johnson grass, like John alluded to, if it was 25% humidities and a north wind coming out at 15 miles an hour, that's probably not the best idea to burn that as is, because we're going to have a lot of that fuel that might jump over. But if it's something this small, you know, we've mowed it down, you know, the flames are only going to be about that tall, then that's a little bit different story. So our fuels, our humidities, and our winds are all interrelated on how they work together and how safe that burn is going to be. We talked about smoke. Some of the forecasting that we can do from the National Weather Service, they use what's called a category day. It's just an index they give 1 through 5. And so they look at lots of different things like mixing height, transport wind speeds, inversion layers, how high that is. And they'll give you a number. And right now it's probably about a 1. Like John alluded to, it's not very good mixing conditions, probably a category day of 1. The highest it is a 5. So the higher it is, the better. That has better dispersion. But one of the issues with those, if you get up to a 5, a lot of times it's associated with very windy conditions. So sometimes it might even be a 5, which is really good dispersion, but the wind is so heavy it doesn't allow that smoke to get up. It keeps it on the ground. And so, you know, usually don't burn in anything less than a 3 category day. So a 3, 4, and a 5 is kind of what we're looking for. OK Fire is a good website to use as well if you live in Oklahoma. It uses the mesonet system. If you live in Oklahoma, you're probably familiar with the mesonet system. There's over 120 mesonet stations across the state. And so it uses that mesonet system and forecasts for prescribed fire. It's a really, really slick website to use. And so if you're in Oklahoma, OK Fire is a really good one. You know, you own the smoke. You know, we asked about how far do you need to be from a road. I'll tell a story on myself where I learned a hard lesson one time. One of the first times I was burn boss, I was pushing the limits on smoke dispersion, and we were burning just on the southeast side of Ardmore, and I thought, oh, we'll get up over Ardmore and be fine. Well, I smoked out the town of Ardmore, and there was people, and we were at Lake Murray State Park, if you know where that is. There was people coming over the Arbuckles, and there was smoke laying on Interstate 35 south of Arbuckles, 15 miles away. So I learned luckily no one got injured. We had some complaints, we had some calls, but I learned a hard lesson as far as smoke and wind and all that kind of stuff. So I would have been responsible if anything would have happened that day. But that just kind of goes to taking all this into account as far as, you know, how far you are, smoke conditions, directions. You know, that's Highway 32 on the north end of here. So we have to have a north wind to burn if we're burning up here. We're about a mile from here to Highway 32. To the south is a Red River over the top of those trees. We have a few neighbors, but they're pretty far away. So this unit right here, we're not concerned about wind direction as far as smoke is concerned. Yeah, that's right. So we know with good smoke dispersion conditions today, it's going to get up and over before it gets to Highway 32. We're not worried about that. I think this forecast to be a 3 or a 4 category day today, last time I looked. So we should be good on smoke dispersion.
Can you have like some traffic control on the highway?
Yep. That's a really good question. She asked about having traffic control on the highway. Absolutely. A lot of times if it's a public road and you're worried about smoke, you can put up big orange signs or have people out there directing traffic. If you're worried about smoke on the roadway, that's a very good policy.
Except on state highways and federal highways. Now that's an issue.
Correct.
Oh, you can't have?
Well, you know, I think Oklahoma's the same way. Texas, I know for sure is. Texas state law actually states that you cannot place signs on a state or federal highway unless you are TxDOT or a contractor working for them. That's the actual state law. Kansas is the same way. I think Oklahoma is actually the same way. But we put signs out. I put signs out. And for most of the time, even in Texas, I don't think anybody will care because what you're doing is notifying. Safety. Just make sure that put them where people can read them, but make sure they're not impeding anything. Oh. And it's good to do that. We've got signs, and that we put out a lot. What that does, it just helps keep a lot of calls slowed down from to the fire departments and stuff because you've notified them, let them know that you're burning, and because a lot of times I'll get calls up around Stillwater say. The fire department will call John. I said, man, we're getting a lot of calls. Everything all right? I said, yeah, it's just good smoke. We just got a lot of smoke going on. But they see that. Everybody's got a cell phone. Everybody thinks they're doing their civic duty by calling in, and they're just causing problems is all they're really doing.
Talking about weather and smoke on season to burn, right now, this is the traditional time to burn. Usually is when the dormant season from November all the way through March. That's the traditional people are burning to manage for livestock, and Russell's going to talk about that. But if you look at, and John's done a lot of looking and published some of this information, that's really as far as the weather conditions, you have less burn days during that time period than you do during the summer. It's more volatile. You think about this time of year, what do we get? We start getting these fronts that stack up, and usually right in front of a front, we get a heavy south wind. That front hits, and now we have a heavy north wind and low humidities.
Everybody seeing the weather forecast Friday? Everybody see what's Friday? What's the wind's going to do Friday? Blow like crazy out of South Point. Because what's coming Saturday?
A front. And then I guarantee humidities are going to plummet on Saturday, Sunday. So that's kind of what we get this time of year. That's our pattern. We start getting into the summertime. A lot of people think, I want to burn in the summer, it's hot, it's going to burn everything up, it's real volatile. Well, traditionally during our summertime, what do we have? We have high humidities, living around here, it's high as humid in the summer. We have green vegetation. Usually we struggle to get enough wind. A couple years ago, we could not get a burn done in July. We never had a wind, including gusts, over 8 miles an hour for the entire month of July. So we don't have wind, it's high humidity. So it's really, as far as fire behavior standpoint, summertime is usually a lot safer. You're gonna have smaller flames, it's gonna be moving a lot slower, much easier to maintain and control. If you do get a spot, you just kind of walk over, you can stomp it out. Well, if we get a spot when it's 30% humidity, blowing 10 miles an hour, and that right there, it's gonna move a lot faster, a lot more difficult. So difference of season to burn with weather and smoke. Now you produce more smoke in the summertime because you have a lot more moisture in that vegetation. So if you have smoke considerations, that's something to think about.